Sandra Hackley, and I will be presenting on special education status as a predictor of parental involvement. I will skip through a lot of this for the sake of time, because I ran out of time the first time. But just wanted to say, parenting is a great responsibility. We have to impact children emotionally, spiritually, physically, and academically. There are some studies that have talked about parental involvement, and also found some cultural components that stood out. Tolson and Lemons found that white parents were more involved in academics than other ethnic groups. And then this study, it talked about how some of the other parents from other groups may have lived in higher crime areas, or maybe did not feel comfortable coming to the school because English wasn't their first language or what have you. So how far should parents go? There was a teacher in Montclair, New Jersey, who went as far as to give parents homework, and their participation and grades impacted the grades of their students. And I'm not sure how well that went over, but that was an extreme case of measuring parental involvement. But there are some components of parental involvement, especially with children in the special education class. It's important to show your presence and verbalizing needs of the students, and making those hard decisions that maybe parents have to face when it comes to what type of class or school their child should be in, or even district. So I actually expected to find that there was no difference between the parent involvement of non-special education students and special education students, but I was actually hoping to find that there was a little more involvement with the special education cohort, just for the purpose of advocacy in high school. The reason I'm saying this is because the special education classification is a very vulnerable population. Students with intellectual disabilities have been found to also fall in lower socioeconomic groups or minority groups. And there was some research there, and just some implications as to why that may be. So my null hypothesis informally was that there was no significant difference in the amount of parental involvement of a family, whether their student was in special education or non-special education. My alternate hypothesis was there is a significant difference in the amount of parental involvement given to students based on whether they are in special education or non-special education. My method. So this was given to us. The participants came from a high school of a public high school in LA County. The sample size was 1,833 students. I found that 45 of those students did not answer questions pertaining to parental involvement, and I went ahead and omitted them from the study. But later, Dr. Crosby told me I did not have to do that. But so my sample size is small. I even actually went overboard and omitted a few more. So I was down to 1,781 students. And then of those students, I just indicated how many were female and male, and which grades they were in. I think the 10th graders were the biggest group of this study. And then some more information that was given to us here. So my two variables, as I noted earlier, that I'm looking at are special education and parent involvement. Special education is a nominal level variable, indicated very simply by saying 0 if you are in non-special education and 1 if you are in special education. Then I indicated the questions here for the parent involvement variable, which is a scale level variable, and I believe a Likert scale was used for this study. So here's some of the questions that were asked of these students. Here are the tests that I run, and for the sake of time, I won't mention them all, but I did an independent samples t-test. I thought this was most appropriate because I was comparing the means of two independent groups. and one was a nominal dichotomous, and the dependent variable was scale. I tested the assumption of normality by generating descriptive statistics, and it was broken down by student classification, whether they were special ed or non-special ed. I looked for outliers with a box plot. I ran some t-tests to look at assumption of homogeneity, and then I found my practical significance by calculating the effect size of the difference between the two means using Cohen's d. To do that, I had to calculate the pooled standard deviation for the two groups, and then I went back and to the descriptive statistics table to find the standard deviations of the two groups and plug those values into the formula to calculate the pooled standard deviation. What I found, I just indicated some highlights here, the mean of the entire group. Here you can see that my sample size was 1,781. So for the non-special education condition, the absolute value of the skewness and kurtosis statistics was less than 1. The distribution appeared to be approximately normal. Again, for the special education condition, the absolute value of the skewness and kurtosis statistics was less than 1. And so the distribution appeared to be approximately normal. So here, independent samples, t-test, the p-value of Levine's test was greater than 0.05. It was actually 0.772. Thus, the dispersion of the two groups is not significantly different. The assumption of homogeneity is supported. I use the equal variances assumed line because the assumption of homogeneity of variance was supported. The p-value associated with the t statistic is greater than 0.05. It's actually 0.611. Thus, the difference between the means of the two groups is not statistically different. Here's my box plot. I found outliers in the non-special education group, and they revealed that they fell below the lowest range. As you can see on the left, with the special education condition, I found no potential outliers. I calculated the pooled standard deviation, which came out to be 0.98. The effect size of the difference in the means was a negative 0.042, or the absolute, which is 0.042. Based on Cohen's criteria, the observed effect size 0.042 is closest to 0.20, therefore it should be considered a small effect. The difference between the means is not practically significant. My conclusion, long paragraph. I conducted independent samples t-tests to compare the amount of parent involvement students would receive depending on whether they were non-special education students or special ed students. Students in the special ed condition, here's my little calculation, reported 0.041 more parent involvement than students in the non-special education condition. Here's my second little equation. This difference was not statistically significant. T of 1779 was equal to negative 0.509. P was equal to 0.611. Therefore, we fail to reject the null hypothesis that there is no significant difference in the amount of family involvement a family will have, whether the student is in special ed or non. Cohen D's effect size value D equals 0.04 suggested a small or minimal level of practical significance. The limitations of the study, my sample, like I said, was very small, 1,781 students. I went down to 49 of them did not complete the question pertaining to parental involvement, which is why I ended up with 1,781. And then the sample size, actually, there were only 170 special ed kids versus 1,611 regular ed students. So it was kind of like a lopsided comparison. So it would be good to see like a bigger sample size the next time. Some additional variables that could be investigated are race, their primary language, and gender, because some of the studies that I looked at for my literature indicated that there was a difference between the ethnic groups, socioeconomic groups, and when it came to special education, especially with intellectually disabled students. So it'd be interesting to look at some of those variables. Although the special education students in the study reported more parent involvement, results indicated no significant difference and a small practical significance. With students in special education being a vulnerable group, the implications here are that there may be a need for more strategies to boost parental involvement within this group. So there's my bias. I would love to see more. I would love to see students in special education reporting even more parental involvement. And then the hope is that there will be a higher level of parental involvement so that it can impact higher achievement. So that's my angle. I would like to see students in that vulnerable classification have more enhanced participation from parents, and that would suggest that we need to look at ways to get parents more involved, regardless of their ethnic or ethnicity, and make them feel safe at the school, make them feel more comfortable participating with the students and supporting them. So here are my references, and I believe I'm going to conclude there. Thank you very much for your time.